to address the number one challenge facing families today, inflation. This will not be my only speech on inflation, I'm sure, but when you look at the economy today, it's clear we've made enormous strides. And our plans and our policies have produced the strongest job creation economy in modern times. In addition, 8.3 million jobs in my first 15 months in office at a record. Unemployment rates are down to 3.6%, the fastest decline in unemployment to start a presidential term ever recorded. And in addition, Americans have applied to start 5.4 million new small businesses last year, 20% more than any other year on record. And I see, and as I see it, everything across the country is, as I go across the country, our economy has gone from being on the mend to on the move. But for every worker I met who's gained a little bit of breathing room to seek out a better paying job, for every entrepreneur who's gained the confidence to pursue their small business dreams, I know the families all across America are hurting because of inflation. I understand what it feels like. I come from a family where when the price of gas or food went up, we felt it. It was a discussion at the kitchen table. I want every American to know that I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority. And I'm here today to talk about solutions, and there's going to be more we're going to have to talk about as well. But first, I want us to be crystal clear about the problem. There are two leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. Not only did it shut down our global economy, it threw the supply chains and demand completely out of whack, especially in countries where more effective recovery responses weren't available, especially in those sectors that rely on semiconductors. These supply challenges have been further hampered by the onset of Delta and Omicron viruses. And you've all seen it, you've all felt it. And this year we have a second cause, Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine. We saw in March that 60% of inflation that month was due to price increases at the pump for gasoline. Putin's war has raised food prices as well, because Ukraine and Russia, two of the world's major breadbaskets for wheat and corn, are essentially completely stalled. Ukraine has 20 million tons of grain in storage in silos right now. They're trying to figure out how to get out of the country and to market, which would reduce prices around the world. Normally we'd have already begun to export them into the market, but it hasn't because of Putin's invasion. So we're working with our European partners to get this food out into the world so they could help bring down prices. But it's difficult because, again, of Putin and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And those two major contributors to inflation are both global in nature. That's why we're seeing historic inflation in countries all over the world. But here's the good news. Because of the actions we've taken, America is in the stronger position to meet this challenge than just about any other country in the world. Some of the roots of the inflation are outside of our control, to state the obvious. But there are things we can do and we can address and we need to do. That starts with the Federal Reserve, which plays a primary role in fighting inflation in our country. I put forward highly qualified nominees to lead that institution, and I strongly urge the Senate to confirm them without delay. The Fed has dual responsibilities. First is achieving maximum employment, and second is stable prices. And while I'll never interfere with the Fed's judgments and decisions or tell them what they have to do, they're independent. I believe that inflation is our top economic challenge right now, and I think they do too. We've built a strong economy with a strong job market. And I agree with what Chairman Powell said last week, that the number one threat is the strength, and that strength that we built is inflation. So the Fed should do its job, and it will do its job, I'm convinced, with that in mind. Now, as I said when I came to to what Congress and the president can do to fight inflation, Americans have two potential paths forward. The first is my plan, the Democratic plan. Plan put forward by congressional Republicans is a second alternative. Here's how each of us would tackle inflation. My plan is to lower everyday costs for hardworking Americans, and lower the deficit by asking large corporations and the wealthiest Americans to not engage in price gouging and to pay their fair share in taxes. The Republican plan is to increase taxes on the middle-class families, let billionaires and large companies off the hook as they raise prices and reap profits at record amounts. And it's really that simple. But let me explain why this choice is so important. Let me start with the Putin price hike, high gas prices, and energy prices. My plan is already in motion. I led the world and other countries to join with us to coordinate the largest release of oil from our stockpiles of all the countries in history, 240 million barrels to boost global supply. Here at home, U.S. oil and gas production is approaching record levels. In fact, we produced more oil domestically in my first year in office than my predecessor did in his first year. To further drive down prices, my administration is allowing the sale of gasoline using homegrown biofuels this summer, which wasn't allowed before. And to reduce our dependence on foreign oil and reckless autocrats like Putin, I'm working with Congress to pass landmark investments to help build a clean energy future as well. From tax credits for businesses to produce renewable energy, to tax credits for families to make their homes more energy efficient. I met with nearly a dozen CEOs of America's largest utility companies, and they, to a person, told me that, and including Southern Company, American Electric Power, and 10 others, they confirm that if we pass the investments I'm talking about, we'll immediately lower families' utility bills by as much as $500 a year, according to their one estimate. That's by what they're going to make their homes more secure in terms of heat not getting out and air conditioning not escaping because they have good insulation. Now, what's the congressional Republican plan with respect to energy? First of all, their plan is to give oil companies a free pass. For example, right now, oil companies are sitting on 9,000 unused leases, oil leases, which are the property of the federal government, on the property of the federal government. Under my plan, they would have to pay taxes, and if they don't use those leases to produce more oil, they just can't sit on it. Unlike under the Republican plan, they'd be allowed to continue to sit on this land without producing while shipping record profits back to their investors. The fact is, the average cost of a barrel of oil has been steady for weeks. So why do gas prices keep going up so high? Republicans have offered plenty of blame, but not a single solution to actually bring down the energy prices. You know, we have no plan. They have no plan to bring down energy prices today, no plan to get us to a cleaner, energy independent future tomorrow. So in the future, American families are no longer subject to the whims of dictators halfway around the world. The next thing is, let's compare our plans when it comes to lowering everyday cost. My plan is to make concrete, common sense steps to bring down the biggest expenses that families are facing. Let's take drug prices. My plan will let Medicare negotiate prices for prescription drugs, like they do with the Department of with the military, as it relates to what the administration is able to negotiate for prices for military. The cap, and I also call for a cap on the price of insulin, which 200,000 American children rely on because they have type 2 diabetes at $35 a month. It costs $10 to make the insulin. They make a significant profit instead of the average price of about $640 a month. Think of the difference it will make in millions of American families, like the family I met with in Virginia about 3 weeks ago, struggling every day, every single month to afford their son's insulin. And on this and other issues, I've laid out specific proposals to Congress to bring down the cost of everyday cost many American families face. And that's in addition to the work my administration has already done to lower prices. Another reason why prices are up for products people need relates to whether or not the manufacturer has access to all the materials they need to build a product. Think of the materials you need to build a house. If you can't get the materials from the ship to shore, from the shore to the home, the prices are going to go up. That's why we brought labor and industry together on the West Coast to improve operations at the ports, to speed up the transfer of products from abroad to shore, from shore to the location where they're going to be used, so that those products can move more quickly and cheaply. We haven't had enough truckers, for example, to deliver the lumber or other goods. That's why we are executing a plan to get more truckers on the job. It reduces the time it takes to move the goods quickly. Another problem we face is in some industries, there isn't enough competition. And I've often said that capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation. So we're promoting competition for everything from internet services to meat processing. We basically have 4 meat processors in the whole country. They process the meat that goes into the hamburgers you buy. So they set the price. When there's no competition, they can set the price higher and higher. So we're helping smaller companies get into the game to compete and help bring down the overall prices. The bottom line is easing these bottlenecks and making our supply chains more secure is a major focus of my economic strategy. So things move more quickly. Prices go down, not up. You know, some parts of my plan I've been able to get done on my own. I mean, just without congressional approval. Some parts are being held up by Congress. But all of my plan is focused on lowering costs for the average family in America, to give them just a little bit of breathing room. Now, what's the congressional Republican plan? They don't want to solve inflation by lowering your costs. They want to solve it by raising your taxes and lowering your income. I happen to think it's a good thing when American families have a little more money in their pockets at the end of the month. But the Republicans in Congress don't seem to think so. Their plan has actually made working families, it's going to make working families poorer. You don't have to take my word for it. It's in writing. They've made their intentions perfectly clear. Senator Rick Scott, Wisconsin, a member of the Senate Republican leadership, laid it all out in a plan. It's the ultra-MAGA agenda. Their plan is to raise taxes on 75 million American families, over 95% of whom make less than $100,000 a year total income. The average tax increase would be about $1,500 per family. They've got it backwards, in my view. I proposed a minimum tax for billionaires. In recent years, the average billionaire has paid about 8% in federal taxes. Congressional Republicans have proposed increasing taxes.
All right, that's the president speaking there at the White House about inflation, what he calls his top domestic priority.